What's up, nerds? It is the Film Grouch Show with Rick Swift and
Madison Monroe.
Madison Monroe. That's right. We are a husband and wife team here in South Florida that has a movie review site, and we are fortunate enough to be able to go and screen movies and get all sorts of good stuff. And we actually, our first podcast was her favorite movie, which is Spaceballs, and our next movie is going to be completely different. It is Hereditary.
She isn't gone. She had private rituals, private friends.
Who's gonna take care of me?
You don't think I'm gonna take care of you?
But when you die,
And Hereditary came out on June 8th of last year, 2018. And as we did with the last podcast, we will be talking about some other events that happened on that day throughout the years. And we will have a word of the day that we will get points for using. And at the end, we will reveal what the word of the day is and see if you can figure out what it is as we're doing our podcast. So, without further ado, why did we pick Hereditary?
You picked it.
Well, I picked it because there was so much hype surrounding this movie. So many people said this was the scariest movie they ever saw. This was like the Exorcist of their generation and all sorts of different things like that. So there was a lot of build-up for it. We actually do have a review on the site from Billy over in Orlando who actually reviewed it for us. I remember he had just come on board and he was emphatic about making sure that this was something that he was able to screen for Film Grouch up in Orlando. So he did write a review, and we will link to that here as well, so you can check it out. But I didn't write a review, Madison didn't write a review, and I was trying really hard to avoid spoilers online to make sure that this movie didn't get ruined for us before we saw it. And I will tell you too that our podcast format going forward and today will be we will discuss non-spoiler related items, and then towards the end we'll have a spoiler alert warning and let you know that throughout the rest of the show, anything we talk about can and will contain spoilers. So that would be the time when you might want to tune out if you haven't seen the movie yet. So okay, let's talk about Hereditary. Let's talk about the characters. Who do we have, Madison?
Well, we have Annie, who is played by Toni Collette.
Yes.
And we have her husband, Steve, played by Gabriel Byrne.
Mm-hmm.
We have their two kids, Peter, played by Alex Wolff, and Charlie, their daughter, played by Millie Shapiro.
Yes, Millie Shapiro is kind of terrifying. And I guess I found out that she played Matilda on Broadway, which if you see this movie, that's kind of shocking to me that she would be on Broadway.
I guess so.
Because she's very, yeah, that's kind of her thing in this movie is she doesn't have a lot of lines. She just really adds this creepy element throughout the entire film. And you have to, like, she does this clucking thing that Madison just did. And that becomes, some people like that, some people don't like it, I guess, from what I was reading online.
I didn't like it.
I thought that it was unnerving. And I thought really that's kind of the tone of the movie was very unnerving itself. That's what I liked about it actually. So let's talk about June 8th, like I said, when this movie came out. In 1984, a little movie came out on June 8th. You want to take a guess what it might have been?
Ghostbusters.
That's exactly what it was.
Oh!
Yeah, it was Ghostbusters.
That was a guess, I swear.
I know it was
look.
a guess. I didn't tell you. So I thought that was kind of funny because I kept thinking after that, I was thinking, what would the Ghostbusters have done in this house and this movie? How they might have reacted to things. Also, in 1995, the Air Force Captain O'Grady, who was shot down in Bosnia, was rescued by some Marines. Um, and so that's what happened on June 8th. So let's now talk about the plot. And again, this is our spoiler-free section. So I'll let Madison maybe talk about the plot.
So when this movie starts, the family's getting ready to go to a funeral for Annie's mother, the kid's grandmother. She just passed away. And it's made pretty clear pretty early on that Annie and her mother did not have the best relationship. It seemed like Annie had a lot of mommy issues.
Yes.
That was one of my notes. She had major mommy issues. And throughout the movie, you learn more and more about how Annie's relationship was with her mom, and more about the grandmother's relationship with her grandkids, which becomes important later on.
Yes. Ultimately, what the movie is set up to be is a movie about how families deal with grief
Mm-hmm.
and how they process that. There's actually a moment where Annie reaches out to a grief counseling, what do you call it, a circle
Support
support
group.
group, yeah. And that's when she's introduced to a character that kind of throws a twist into the plot, so to speak. But what makes this movie interesting and what makes people talk about it a lot, I think, is just the way that it was shot. And I found out that it was the house was actually completely a sound set. It was just completely set up. Um, not it's not a real house or anything like that. And they were able to pull off some really interesting shots because of that. And there's this tied-in theme, which when we get to the spoiler-free section, I can talk a little bit more about it. But there's this dollhouse theme throughout the movie.
Well, Annie's job was to create miniatures,
Yeah.
which is very cool, I think.
Yeah, it was really interesting and cool, but and there's talk about this show. There's this, the kind of ticking clock element in this movie is there's this show that she has to get her dollhouse ready, her miniatures ready for.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're right. It's
Like
not,
an exhibit.
yeah, it's a giant exhibit of miniature things. But what's really interesting about it is the director, Ari something, I can't remember his name now. You can look it up. Ari,
Ari Aster.
yeah, Ari Aster. He uses the elements of the film and the miniatures to tell the story, and he does it in a way that's actually really interesting and compelling, and it keeps the suspense. To me, it was a very suspenseful movie. Not everybody agreed with me.
No. I thought it was boring.
Some people thought it was really boring, and I was looking at some, a few reviews online, which is kind of a nice thing that I can do when it's a movie that's been out for a while that we can kind of like see what other people might have thought about it. But some people just said this was the most boring movie I've ever seen. Some people said I'm so disappointed because there was so much hype that I
Mm-hmm.
was so looking forward to being that this was what was a horror movie. What's interesting to me though is that people have this definition of horror movie that I think has evolved, or at least since I was a kid. I think everybody thinks of horror movies differently. There's slasher movies, suspense movies. Like to me, the most terrifying movie to this day I've ever seen is The Silence of the Lambs. Maybe it's not a horror movie, but it's horrific to me because it's about a person. It's not a monster or something like that. And when you start to get into like the supernatural elements, that's when it starts to get a little ridiculous for people maybe. But with Silence of the Lambs, that's just a psycho guy, and he's a genius too, which makes him even more terrifying. But to me, that's a horror movie. So
Well,
when you
that's a great movie.
yeah, it is. And when you think about like Paranormal Activity, that movie is boring as hell too, right up until the point when it's not boring.
Eh,
And that's very similar to Hereditary.
that was less boring than Hereditary. Hereditary had a lot of slow, boring parts.
Well, it's funny because you say boring. To me, I was on the edge. I wrote down in my notes like just what did I write? I wrote like I found myself holding my breath in a lot of scenes. I was actually holding my breath, and I caught myself like, wait, why am I holding my breath? And I think like when Max was talking about what was that, Black Swan, and he said with one of I can't remember the director. He's like, whenever you see one of those that guy's movies, you never know what's going to happen. Like the next scene, you might see something totally insane, and that's kind of what I
Yeah.
was waiting for with Hereditary. I was waiting to be put at unease. And you could argue, there are definitely some scenes in this movie where I wrote down, oh my God, about 6 different times. So, I mean, it wasn't boring to me.
Yeah, there were a couple of parts where I was shocked.
Yes.
But for the majority of it, I was bored.
Yeah, and I heard that Ari Aster didn't want to do a lot of jump scares. He doesn't like that kind of jump scare crap.
Yeah.
So he wanted to really get to he wanted to terrify you on a level that would make sense to you. And it wouldn't be, like cheap Hollywood effects and stuff like that. And he went through for practical effects throughout as well. I found out how they did the chalkboard scene, which,
Magnets.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not much of a reveal to figure that one out.
No.
So before we get into the spoiler section, I mean, that's about 10 minutes we have right here. So I think we're ready to start getting into the good stuff if you want. And then we can really have fun.
All right.
All right. So from now on, whatever we say could ruin the movie. It could completely ruin the movie.
So this is your warning.
This is your one and only warning, and we're just going to get right into it. We're not using any phatic speech. We're going right into the facts, and we're going to give away some goods. So pay attention or don't pay attention, depending on if you've seen the movie or not. All right, so what I really thought was cool about it was that it was this creepy kind of Exorcist like thing but it was like surrounding the entire family.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie, the whole time, they were giving you clues as to what it was going to be if you were paying attention. And remember, a couple times I'm like, look at that symbol. Like I even saw the symbol on the post. I'm like, that symbol's on the post. I don't know what it means, but it's on the post.
Mm-hmm.
And then the post kills Charlie.
Right. In a very unfortunate series of events.
Very unfortunate. Let's talk about Charlie though. Charlie
was very strange.
Yes.
She had very strange obsessions, like with the dead bird, when she cut off the bird's head and she carried the dead bird's head around with her.
Mm-hmm.
That was very weird.
Mm-hmm. Well, you find out about what Charlie is. Like her mom even said, you never cried. She said to her, she's like, you never cried. Even when you were born, you didn't cry. You've never cried in your entire life.
Mm-mm.
Well, and then you find out why, because she's like the king of hell. One of the 7 kings of hell. Sorry, I don't want to piss off the other kings of hell.
Sorry.
But yeah, that's the thing, guys. It's so we'll tell you what happens. So the grandmother is in this cult.
Mm-hmm.
And the very beginning of the movie, when they're at the funeral for the grandmother, Annie says, my mom had a lot of strange friends and they had a lot of weird rituals and things like that, and I never really knew what was going on. And so she tells the audience, there was something off with my mom.
Right.
Like, you're probably thinking rituals like, oh, they all had tea together or some crap like that, or they were in the red hats, whatever.
Yeah, or they play, Pinochle, or
right?
whatever those
Exactly.
weird card games are.
Exactly. No, she was
She was in a cult.
head of a cult.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the support group, she meets this lady,
Joni,
mm-hmm. who steers her in this direction to try to possess her son to get him possessed by a demon. No, the king of hell.
Yeah, one of the kings of hell. One of the kings of hell. Paimon or Paimon? Paimon?
Yes,
Paimon. 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 I don't know if spelling counts. If this is Jeopardy, it might count. It actually doesn't count.
No, spelling doesn't count in Jeopardy.
But yeah, so that's like, the big reveal, I guess. But all the stuff that happens throughout the movie, that's what I thought was awesome about it, is that they're giving it away. They're showing you, the foreshadowing in it is really clear if you know what's going to happen at the end. But until the end, you don't really know what's going to happen. What I liked and I didn't like about it, one of the things I didn't like about it was all this talk about the miniatures. Like, I really wanted to see this show. I wanted to see what this show was, and I felt like they were trying to tell us that the house was a dollhouse and this was all not real, and they were doing this whole like, oh, this is all in their mind or something, and they didn't do any of that crap. It was just this neat effect that the director was like, oh, that's cool. I like dollhouses. I want to do this whole thing like a dollhouse, which had nothing to do with anything. It was a big nothing, and I was like, damn, that was cool.
I know. It was misleading.
Yeah, which is fine, because what also was interesting is that she detailed or chronicled every major event of her life as part of her miniature show.
Yeah.
including when her daughter is decapitated by this post.
By her, where her son is driving the car.
Oh yeah, we have to talk about this scene.
Okay.
This scene was my major oh my god. I mean, you two were like, oh my god.
So the mom makes the son take the daughter to a high school party. None of them want to be in this turn of events.
No.
So the girl goes, what's her name? Charlie goes with Peter to the party. She eats a piece of cake that has peanuts in it, and she has a severe peanut allergy.
Oh, we have to talk about this cake though. It's not like, there's dust. There's giant chunks of walnut or peanuts. I mean, you can see it. It's like,
yeah, it's very
hello,
obvious.
if you know this could kill you.
Yes, and she still eats it.
It's like eating a bag of razor blades at a party.
I know. It's like, what's wrong
it.
with you that you ate this cake with this obvious chunks of peanuts in it?
Obvious chunks.
And meanwhile, brother's over getting high or whatever.
Yeah.
But to his credit, he does leave immediately and try to get her to the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, he's picking her up and carrying her. He's running out. I mean, he does, and in my opinion, he does everything right at that moment.
He tries. He puts her in the car.
Oh, God.
So they're driving down the dark highway, and then he's driving, and he swerves to get out of the way of something. What was in the road? A deer or something?
I don't think we ever find out, actually. It was something from the cult.
Oh, something was
because
in
that
the
post
road,
had the mark, so they knew that was going to happen.
So she's trying to breathe, and she can't breathe very well. So she gets up and leans her head out the window right as he swerves to avoid something in the road, and he hits the post, and her head flies off. And no more.
No.
And then he just stops the car, and he starts freaking out, crying.
Yeah, I mean... Well, actually, he kind of just goes into shock.
Yeah,
and you just kind of see him drive home.
Yeah.
But I keep thinking, like, if you have kids that are always sticking their hands or whatever...
Don't ever let them do that.
Let them watch this movie, because they will...
When you go on the rides in Walt Disney World, and they have those warnings, like, don't put your hands and arms.
Yeah.
Keep your hands and arms inside the ride at all time. Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah, only it's her whole head. And But then you find out, like I said, at the end, you find out that it was all supposed to happen.
Yeah.
The post was marked. They knew everything that was going to happen. Yeah. And apparently this is where it gets kind of fun, I guess, if you want to get into political stuff. She was born in the wrong body. She was born a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops. Sorry. She's the king of hell. She's supposed to be a boy. So the whole point is, yeah, Charlie, I'm sorry. You were supposed to be a guy. So your brother, we're just going to possess him.
Yeah.
So we're going to kill you.
Yeah.
Don't worry, though. We're going to bring you back into Peter's body, and then Peter will be you.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
And one of the kings of hell.
Yeah, like, that was weird.
I was like, okay. Couldn't they just let her be like... And I guess there was something with where Annie's mom made her, like, not have, or she didn't have a kid or something like that, or she got in trouble for not having a son, or I don't remember. Something with that. I was kind of bummed though, because I talked to one of my friends, right? I talked to Storm Duper, for the Faking Star Wars podcast thing that I do with him, and he said, "There's only one thing I'm going to say. At the end, everything makes sense." Mm-hmm. But I didn't hear that. In my head, I heard, "Oh, it'll all make sense in the real, in our world." And then so I kept thinking that this was just going to be a metaphor for grief and everything, and this was all going to be in her mind. But it totally wasn't that.
No. And
I got to tell you, this movie disturbed me. There were a few scenes that like stuck with me for a couple days. The scene I call it the audition scene, where if you've ever seen the movie Audition, there's a part where they like saw off people's limbs with piano wire. Mm-hmm. There's a scene where Toni Collette is chopping off her own head with piano wire, and you can hear it, and she's floating, and it is like, if that scene doesn't scare, it just doesn't creep the hell. Oh, it's not a horror movie. That was horrifying. And then her headless corpse floats up into this treehouse, which that treehouse was kind of cool, up until the end when you find out that it's like a cult hangout or whatever, and that's where they all like meet. But yeah, there's just a lot of I really dug this movie. Gabriel Byrne in it, he is kind of the grounded reality that you think that maybe they're going to be able to make this movie actually not be some supernatural thing. And I kept grounding myself to him, like, okay, this is all gonna make sense. 'Cause that's what my friend. That's what Duper said. It's gonna all make sense. But what he meant is at the end, yeah, it all makes sense. They laid everything out, and they're a satanic cult. But yeah, so and that woman Joni or whatever, she's always some kind of nutball in every role I've ever seen her in. She's always like somebody that I'm like, don't trust that lady. There's gonna be problems later on. Sure enough. Yeah, that was driving you crazy, I know. Well, I talked about some of my dislikes. What were some of your dislikes?
I already said there's too many points of long, boring. Oh, and I also felt it was a very odd soundtrack for a horror movie.
Oh, I love the sound. I actually put that as one of my likes. I love the
Really?
soundtrack. Yeah, it reminded me of Sinister, where it was just, again, unnerving. The whole movie to me just put me at complete unease. I was never comfortable the whole time
Yeah.
I was watching it. I was just like, I didn't know what was about to happen. I didn't know what I was about to see. There was all this creepy stuff with the miniatures, like the thing where it's like her mom is standing there and that didn't
Yeah.
actually happen. The scene where she's like, "Oh yeah, I was gonna set my kid on fire because I sleepwalk," and I was like, "Okay, are they gonna do anything with that?" And they didn't really go anywhere with that. Some of my dislikes were like the whole Gabriel bro, the dad. She tried to burn the book when she found out that the book was like a conduit to the darkness, to the dark entity or
The
whatever.
daughter's book.
Yeah, the daughter's book. She tried to burn it, and then it burned her skin.
Yeah.
So she was like, "Oh crap, I can't burn that." And then at the end, she tries to have her husband burn the book, and she's like, "Just throw it in. I love you." And she actually got nominated for some meter thing for best actress or whatever. Toni Collette did, which I thought she did a great job.
For this movie?
Yeah, for this movie.
Oh, wow.
And like that was a big powerful scene. I mean, all her scenes were great. The scene where they're at the dinner table and she's just like, "Get your fucking face off your fucking face," like this stuff. I was like, yeah, there's a lot of anger, and that's why you could have made this movie not have a supernatural ending, and it still would have been a really good movie. Really, just how this family dealt with the grief and stuff like that. Yeah, but I know. Yeah, but I hate that. When he throws the book in, he catches on fire and dies, and I was just like, oh, that sucks because it was supposedly tied to her.
Right.
But I guess it was just a trick. Haha, fooled you. I'm Paimon the king.
Oh, yeah.
I guess because they didn't really. Again, that's not something they explain.
No.
Because they're just, they don't feel like they have to explain everything, which is kind of nice. Not every movie has to explain every single thing.
No.
So yeah, the one thing that people will definitely be talking about forever with this movie is the head. When you see the severed head of the little girl.
Yeah, on the side of the road.
And you're just like, I can't believe they showed it. And you're just mortified when they show it. And the funny thing is, our cat, I wrote this down in my notes. Our cat jumped up on the couch and he hit the rewind button. And we almost, and I caught it just in time to where we didn't have to watch the head again. Because I was like, oh God, I don't want to see that again.
That's right. We didn't want to relive that.
No. So I managed to catch it before we had to watch that head again. Oh my God, that was horrifying. Because you're just like, they don't show it when it happens.
No, it's later.
And then they just kind of bam. By the way, here's the head. And again, when I say she chronicles every major aspect of her life, she chronicles that accident.
She does.
Down to the nth detail with the head and everything else. And her husband's just like, that's not cool. But he doesn't really. I mean, I'd be like, hell no. Look, everybody processes their grief however they want, but I'm processing my grief, and I don't want to see that crap.
No.
Get rid of that.
That's
his daughter. That's his daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if anybody had like the weakest part in this movie, it was probably Gabriel Byrne, Steve, because he was just kind of along for the ride. He wasn't very strong. I don't even know if we ever found out really what he did for a living. It was just kind of in and out, like Chandler, just kind of, I'm in an office and I'm always having a fight with the insurance people about the grave always being dug up and everything. And I was like, oh, okay.
My weenus is out of whack.
His weenus? What are you talking about?
Chandler.
Oh yeah, Chandler with the weenus. Yeah. What else? What else? What else? What else?
Well, I'm not sorry that I watched it. It's not like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 4, where I wanted that hour and a half of my life back. I'm glad I watched this movie.
Yeah, I never watched that one.
Don't watch it.
H-Man, Henry, he reviewed that, and that was pretty much what he said, almost
It's terrible.
verbatim. He said, "I wish I could not see that movie. Like I wish I could go back in time and not have seen that movie." It's like, wow. Didn't that have
Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger.
yeah, Renee Zellweger with her man-eater face, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to see it because
Don't.
it's one of these movies though where everybody's like, "Don't see it.
Don't see it.
Don't see it."
But we're not saying that about Hereditary. Hereditary is worth it.
Yeah, but you said you were bored through a lot of it.
Yeah, but still, there was enough to keep me interested, mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely would recommend this movie to anybody who wants to just be creeped out and be, you know, like you're just you don't know what's going to happen from 1 minute to the next. I mean, if you've listened to the podcast now, you probably know if you've been listening to the spoiler part, but I mean, even us talking about it doesn't do it justice, obviously. You have to see it for yourself, and it's like it's like a horrible macabre painting that shifts from scene to scene that you kind of wish you hadn't seen. But then at the end, you're like, I'm glad that I saw that because it was well done. To me, I mean, like I said, I actually put in my likes, I liked the sound. I liked that it was off-putting. I liked the acting was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the creepy vibe throughout the entire movie. I do believe that it lived up to the hype, personally. I just think that it's one of these films that takes a while to develop. But again, if you just want to watch a movie about a family dealing with grief, this you could turn this movie off maybe right about to the point where you find out about the possession thing and just kind of click, and then you've still got a really good movie about this poor family that, I mean, but then again, everything is predestined because that's what the grandmother, she used her daughter basically as a vessel to bring in this king of hell.
Right.
That's the whole point of her life, was her daughter being this conduit to bring in this monster. So, yeah, I guess like I said, my biggest pet peeve or whatever dislikes was the a lot of build up where things didn't go as I was expecting them to go. But I definitely didn't hate anything, that's for sure. And I do understand why a lot of people think this is the greatest movie of 2018. I think the way that it was shot makes it have that, like I can see the argument being valid for that, but not everybody likes that kind of delivery. Some people want it like more, I don't know, like what would you have added? Let me ask you this. What would you have added to not make it so boring? Because I actually heard it was 3 hours long and they had to cut out like almost 40 minutes of just dialogue with just the family having dialogue and dealing with things.
I would have taken out some of the slower parts, some of the slower, boringer parts where there was nothing going on.
But what would you have added in there?
I wouldn't have added anything. I would have taken out. It was too long.
Then it would have been a short. It wouldn't have been a feature-length movie.
It was 2 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you could have cut it down to an hour and a half.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 2 hours and 7 minutes was the running time.
2 hours and 7 minutes.
It could have been trimmed down to an hour and a half, or an hour and 40 minutes.
This is one of those things where we'll just have to agree to disagree, and we can do that because we love Spaceballs. We definitely don't argue about Spaceballs. So
this is true.
We're not arguing about Hereditary either. I would say we both liked it a lot. It's just Madison just thinks that the hype was a little oversold, more than I do. I think it was justified. So. Do you have anything else, dear?
No, sir.
We're about 30 minutes in here.
Nope.
We just recently watched Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. and
Oh yeah.
Alex Wolff is in that
Yes.
for like 5 minutes because he becomes the Rock
I
throughout.
recognize him from the
Yes,
mole.
Mole. That's an Austin Powers reference in case you didn't know. Yes. So I guess that's about it for Hereditary. Now I can reveal the word of the day that I only used once.
Yes, you only used it once.
I used it
You're the
once.
winner.
It was phatic, which is speech used to express or create an atmosphere of shared feelings, goodwill, or sociability rather than convey information. So it's kind of like, how's the weather? Great weather we're having, stuff like that. Um, Interestingly enough, there wasn't a lot of phatic speech in Hereditary, even though it was slow in parts. There are parts where people are just literally just staring off and thinking and
Mhm.
absorbing and
Mhm.
feeling and like real emotions and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So it's eh. It's one of those movies I don't know if I would watch it again for a while because I can still see that scene where she's floating around. Not the one where she floats up into the treehouse, but when he's walking around in the house towards the end there and he's looking for the body and you see her kind of floating and she's crawling up on the ceiling and on the wall and
Mhm.
yeah, I was like
It's
that's
creepy.
gonna stay with me for a while.
Yeah, that was pretty creepy.
So hopefully you've enjoyed our little podcast or little chat about Hereditary. If you've seen Hereditary or if you haven't seen Hereditary, definitely like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things that you should do. We are on iTunes and Podbean and Stitcher and all the fun stuff like that. So definitely let your friends know what we're all about over at Film Grouch. And this has been the Film Grouch Show. I'm Rick,
I'm Madison.
and have a wonderful evening or day or whatever time it is. I don't know. All right. Bye.